Anyway,
Yeah.
let's get on to the Manchester Derby, because I guess that would have been the quote unquote next, key game of the weekend, because there weren't a lot of exciting football matches this weekend.
No, not a lot. I said to you, I didn't really watch this game. I watched the highlights when I was in the airport yesterday. Not there was many highlights, but again, I think this is, City again, Jekyll and Hyde team at the moment. You don't know which City's going to turn up on which week. The good City turned up this week, and Haaland scored some goals, and that's the City that we've kind of not seen for a while, because he hasn't been anywhere near his level, and City haven't been
But
able to supply him the ammunition.
that's the key. And I think Doku had one of his better games that we haven't seen him play in a long while. And that allowed, when he's that effective on the wing and getting balls in the box, it makes Haaland, his job easier. And Haaland, I think he had a great game with Norway. He was hot, and it was just a matter of get him the ball. When you have a striker who's as hot as he is right now, just get him the ball and he will finish. And that's what he did. And if you go look back or rewatch the game and you watch the first 20, 25 minutes, you will think, oh, this is a nice little football match. Man United came prepared to play, but that did not last long, right? That, like I said, by the 25th minute onwards, it became one-sided. And as soon as City got that first goal, which I don't even remember what time they scored that first one, but once that went in, and even how it went in, like Doku's first cross gets blocked, the ball just happens to bounce perfectly to him, where he just, all right, let's go again, crosses it back, and boom.
That's what you do though with City, right? That's when they're on their form, is they punish every missed opportunity, and it just, they do get the luck of the bounce. But I think City needed that, because they obviously not been playing that great themselves, right?
Yep.
And now, as you and me were talking about this just before we came on, like, Amarin's on the hot seat again. When are United going to learn? You kind of got to leave somebody in charge for a while to really build something. And again, this morning, when I logged in and I was going through just EPL news, the kind of routine that we have, and it's all Amarin on the verge, who's going to take over. And I just feel that you haven't really got him the players that he needs. You need a couple more windows to get him all the players to the play where he wants to play. And everyone keeps saying about his style and his tactics, and he's inflexible and he can't do this, and all that kind of stuff, right? And I do think so too. But at the end of the day, if you believe it's going to work, and it's worked everywhere else you've been, then you've got to give them the players to execute it, right? And I think United's failures to get rid of players has always been their biggest issue.
Yeah. Here's the thing: is when it comes to Amarin, I think sometimes
he's trying to be too cute.
And you have,
he's trying to be too cute sometimes.
When you're a club, you have to be careful with the manager you bring in, right? Because I remember a lot of people laughing at Liverpool when he ended up taking the job with Man United, and people saying, "Oh, he turned down Liverpool for Man United." But all the stories that I've heard is that Liverpool, they did interview him, but after the interview, they realized he's not the right fit for what they want. And maybe I think in today's day and age, there's nothing wrong with saying, this is my playing style, and this is how I find the best way, for my teams to win. However, if you're not willing to be adaptable based on the players you currently have, you're not going to succeed long term. He might not be around long enough. If he's like, you have to be willing to adapt somewhat, right? Like, he likes to play a back three, but does he have the manpower to truly play that way? And you made a good point on transfers. There's no way. He's basically had one transfer window, two, right? When did he come in? Before January last year?
Yeah, he's had two. I think he's had two, and then, but even then, it's like they brought in
summer windows.
It's right, and then the summer they spent some money, but when you look at the window that they've had with them, but you're still playing with Casemiro, and Casemiro's more shot than my knees. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just
And we still know, like, defensively, they need to be. They're probably a player or two away from really having a set back line. they're probably still not set on their keeper, right? Even though they got rid of Onana and brought in the young guy, you don't think that this guy, what's his name again? That played
Lemons.
for, yeah, no, not the one that they just signed.
But
Was it
Hilda, what was it?
Bayandere?
Bayandera, something like
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
like he's, in my opinion, he's more of a backup than a starter, right?
Yep.
And
I think that's fair.
right, and like I said, you have the back playing a 3-man back line. You don't have the horses that can truly, like. The point is, they're just not a top team right now. Yes, you added some nice pieces, but they're not. Your midfield's still a bit of a mess, and defense is still a mess. So you're far from a finished product.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is I think at the end of the day, he needs more time just to get them going, and I think he needs another window. But at the end of the day, this is Man United, and if as we were just looking at the table, if you don't start picking up results soon, again, this could be one of those seasons where you've got, we just said it, like you've got 6 or 7 teams that are absolutely running around with the like chickens with their head cut off, because you got West Ham, who's all at 6s and 7s, and West Ham's only points this season was after Forest started to capitulate themselves. Wolves, rock bottom again, same as last year, and on a steady slope. Have scored, a few goals, but are conceding more than scoring. Villa can't score a goal to save their life. 4 games, 0 goals. So you're kind of looking at it going, Leeds are there, Sunderland's up there, Burnley's there, like Forest are down there. So it's who's going to get them. I think what I'm telling is let's say week 4 to 8, who gets themselves going in those weeks to get out of that mire. Because at the end of the day, I think you could have 6 or 7 teams going down, and I think that's part of why the Premier League isn't very exciting at the moment, is because there's just a whole hodgepodge of teams that just aren't playing well. Everton, they had a couple of good results, but going back to being Everton that can't score goals again this weekend. And then, you look around the league and, Fulham's not added a lot of strength. You kind of wonder when they get some injuries, how that's going to play into effect. And, Brentford, Brighton, they're all a bit Jekyll and Hyde too. So it's a little bit more all over the map than I think anyone would like to say for the start of the season, because we haven't seen really any sort of, I think the only game that had any bit of fight or fire was the Newcastle Liverpool game, and that's about it, right? It's a bit of an odd start to the season, if I'm honest.
It's and you and I were talking on this. It feels as if, to me, a lot of the teams, like once transfer window was done, or probably not even when it was done, a week or so before that, a lot of teams kind of figured, all right, we see how the big teams have spent. How can we compete?
Yeah, right? It is almost like some teams have given up. I agree.
And this is not me being like, I'm a Liverpool fan, so from my perspective, less games that we may have to worry about. But when you actually take a step back and just what I'm seeing is not enjoyable football. And maybe it's just because of, this summer just seemed to be a bit wacky, and no team has really gotten off to the start that, even from a Liverpool perspective, team's been horrible. Yeah, we're 4-0, but we haven't looked good. Maybe one game against Arsenal, we looked decent, but even then we weren't at our best. We haven't looked like like a defending championship team, but we're still 4-0. So
yeah, I think it is a bit of a foregone conclusion at this point, and I think it's a case of that hasn't helped the league right now. But I also think taking that the refereeing decisions are a bit more head scratching. You take into the fact that Chelsea's spent so much money, now they've got charges, but we expect those charges just to be a financial hit against the previous owner, not against the club. So because Chelsea's openly the ones that reported their issues, and they're the only ones that said, look, there's irregularities here, and so they're all expecting it's just going to be a financial penalty, which again I think is a bit of a mockery. I understand it, and I will say that I think it's I think we already knew that Abramovich was doing shady things. The fact that it might just hit Abramovich in his pocket because his money still hasn't been released to him under the embargo that the British has with the Russians. So they'll take money out of that to pay the fine, and Chelsea probably won't face any sanctions really in there. And I'm a little bit torn on that. You know, part of me is like, well, they should get some points deduction because, you know, Forest and Everton got points deduction for financial irregularities. So I'm kind of a little bit on the you should get something. But
I think they will.
Premier League, they're about as weak as water, and
I think
a financial penalty because it's easy for them to get out of it. And we already know that the City deal is going to be announced sooner rather than later, and they'll probably just have a financial penalty because, again, they're just weak as water, and the Premier League's gutless.
I agree with the fine part. There's going to be some kind of fine. It's not going to really affect Chelsea. I actually do think they are going to get penalized. I think there's going to be a 3 to 4 point penalty, but I think it's going to be prearranged with Chelsea where they won't appeal it. Right. So rather than going with
transfer embargo, that would just royally screw them up for a
it would, but I think the problem is, and I don't agree with this.
Players on the books.
I think it's the league. The league makes money off of Chelsea, and it's kind of like they have whether you want to call it part of the big six or, you know, they have too much power, whatever it may be. I just think there will be an agreement made before any penalties announced, and the fine and the points deduction will have been agreed upon prior. So they're already going back and forth. Oh, we should, you know, we have to give you something. 10 would be fair if we had caught you guys legitimately, since you self-reported. You know, I think they'll get like a 3 to 4 point deduction. Could be wrong.
That requires Richard Masters to have a pair of balls, and his balls.
But the thing is, it's almost as if they don't, this is going to open a bigger can of worms down the line.
And I don't think they will. I think at the end of the day, I think this is no different than the Man City one. We were still sat waiting for that announcement. The fact that City didn't appeal after their previous thing the other week tells you that they've probably come to an agreement on something that City didn't like. So that's, you know, that you drop yours, we'll drop ours, we'll all walk away, and then we'll all just know that, you know, you'll forever have an asterisk next to your titles. And that's the way it's going to go, because at the end of the day, the Premier League hasn't made rules that are fit and proper. They haven't executed what they're supposed to do as the governors of the sport. And I think that their failure is, you know, now in the hands of state-run football teams. So I think at the end of the day, the Premier League doesn't have endless amounts of money like Man City do. And same for Chelsea. Todd Bowley's probably got lots of money that he's swindled out of somebody else. So at the end of the day, I think it's just going to come down to it that, you know, the league is going to be down between Liverpool and Arsenal. I think, you know, Chelsea, you know, they'll shoot themselves in the foot at some point, because Maresca, I don't think, is good enough to win the title. But, you know, it's I think it's just a little bit boring at the moment. And I think you haven't really had any games where it's really kind of got spicy or really got anything into it. And I think, you know, we're just going to see, I think, a couple of teams pull away, and the rest of the league might be where the interesting part is. The relegation battle might be the most interesting thing this season. Yeah,
definitely. I think you'll have 3 levels, you know, the top 2, 3, maybe the next group, and then the bottom, right?
Yeah, I think you'll have a race for the Champions League, and then I think I think it could be one of 8 that could go down, right? So, or 3 of 8 that could go down, and then, you know, and you have a lot of teams that you just, like, I couldn't tell you where Brighton's going to be, where Forest are going to be, where Fulham's going to be, where Brentford's, because they're all 1 week good, 1 week bad, 1 week horrendous. Like, it's just so it's a bit of an odd one, but it's, you know, as you know, we haven't sat down and looked at, you know, even this week's games. There's not that many that jump off the page and go, this is going to be an absolute barnstormer.
No, there's not much. Before we end it, let's quickly recap the rest of the score line. So again, first game of the weekend was Arsenal beating Forest. The Cherries beat Brighton 2-1 with a late winner. That was actually a decent game if you watch the highlights. Bournemouth has looked real good this year. Like, you know, they've got I think they have 9 points
Yeah,
or at least their only
they
loss
let a
is to
lot of players
Liverpool.
leave too, right? So, but they obviously knew what they had in their building, and
Yeah,
good for
and
them.
they were one of the teams that were hit pretty bad with injury last year. So being healthier now, they probably know, all right, we could afford to lose a few players, knowing, the depth that, and not when
Yeah,
I mean depth, might not be depth
they
compared to the top
built
team.
enough cover
Yeah,
during
yeah,
last year's problems that this year it's just become a bonus to have extra. So and it's good for them. Brian, again, a little bit, as I just said, up and down. Don't know what you're going to get from them week to week, right?
yep. Then we have Newcastle 1-0 over Wolves, which
Yeah,
I'm actually surprised it was only 1-0.
it's a good goal though, from that Waltmead. And
It
interesting, he did look like that's a number 9's finish. And
it was.
the rumor is, that people said about Isak when they signed Isak, they like he might quietly surprise you. And so far, he's looked like a good signing, because even I raised my eyebrow when I looked at the fee that they paid for him and the fact that you didn't really hear from him, but apparently is another gem that they've got, right?
I will temper it a little based on the opponent.
That's true, but you can only
Right.
beat
And
who
this is
beats you.
not 100%, right? The only side note I'll say about Walter Mead is when I saw him first glance, I was like, wait, Anthony Gordon doesn't have a mustache. He looks like a taller version of Anthony Gordon with a mustache. And when you see the two of them, then you'll be like, I see it. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Right?
well, as we said, Wolves have got their issues, right? They just can't seem to start.
Yeah.
I don't know
So
what, but again, when you keep selling players and not replacing the quality, it's going to come to bite you.
Wolves, though, should have taken the lead in that game. So they will look back and saying that was a game where if they had taken the lead early, who knows what would have happened. But again, doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Next we have, and we touched on this briefly, Everton 0, Villa 0. Another snooze fest. Crystal Palace 0, Sunderland 0.
Good
Fulham
point for
1-0
Sunderland.
over.
Hey, every point matters, right?
Hey, right now, Sunderland, of all the teams that got promoted, they are in a decent spot if they can,
7 points.
continue. Yeah, right. For them, home
They're above
wins.
Man City.
They're above both of the Manchester teams. So, good on them right now. Fulham 1-0 over Leeds. West Ham losing 3-0 to Spurs. It's West Ham.
Yeah, I think Graham Potter's time is going to be up, and I think you're going to see Nuno in a West Ham dugout sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I saw that rumor today. Brentford 2, Chelsea 2.
Classic.
You know what? I'm glad Brentford was able to get the draw in that game, because I just don't want. I like to see when Chelsea drop points. And then Burnley losing 1-0 to Liverpool. I won't dwell on that game, but it was one of the worst games I've ever. Like 90 minutes, I wish I could get back. Right? Like it was
those games
boring.
lately.
I don't like teams that sit back. There was only one team trying to play. The other team just basically said, everybody sit back, don't give them any gaps, any opportunity. And Liverpool just kept passing the ball around, hoping they can find that opening, right? And it kind of takes away from a team that can play, because they're not able to really show their skill when they play that defensive and that. Like, they had 3 shots